We got throttle. We got clutch. We got front brake lever, kind of. No brakes, but we got lever. We got a rear set. We got another rear set. So I need to make the throttle cable work. The current throttle cable I have, Motion Pro guy for an R6, which doesn't make a ton of sense for this engine, but I actually had it laying around, so I'm going to use it. But this cable, I don't want to modify the cable, so the cable is a hair longer than it needs to be, the way the cable sticks out of the sleeve. And so I'm going to get to modifying the throttle cable bracket that mounts directly to the carburetor. And we have throttle. So with this cam in here that controls the throttle speed, there are a bunch of cams. You can change the profile of the throttle. And with this cam, it's about a quarter turn, which is probably about right. This bike isn't going to make a ton of power. And I could adjust it to be less if I want. We'll see how it feels when it rides. But we have throttle. I'm putting the stock clutch cable back in, and it actually just works with the lever I bought, which is this billet clutch lever. I will need to shorten the length between here and here because this doesn't have enough travel to adjust, but I'm going to do that last. But right now what I'm noticing is I don't have enough throw. So it pulls, it works fine, except it's not pulling it far enough. So even with the clutch in, we're stuck in gear. So we're going to modify this guy and make it work. I took the dimensions of the two previous pockets, just made a third one in a line. So the further away from the fulcrum, your longer your lever, right, the more distance it's going to move with the same amount of angle of movement. So I made this further away to give me another 10 or 20% of movement. So I think that in conjunction with making this a little longer, and I might be able to get enough throw for this thing to work. So I have the stock clutch lever set up back on here, and it still doesn't move this enough to totally freewheel the wheel. So still stuck. So how I'm going to compare the stock setup to my new setup is lock the clutch and take a measurement here. And that's showing about 1:0:15 1 inch and call it 20 thousandths if I give it a wiggle. So then I need to switch to my new setup. I made it a longer lever arm, and I'll make a little extension to take all the slack out of the cable, and then I'll see if I can get to the stock dimension or less. So if I can match the stock dimension, that's a big thumbs up. All right, so I very quickly, sloppily, didn't even deburr, turned a little piece to extend the adjuster so that I would be able to take all the slack out without being down to the last thread. That scares me, I don't want to ruin it. When I make a real one, I'll make one that encapsulates the ferrule on the end of the cable, because if you don't, the cable can just pop out. But for now, that little extension piece allows me to take all the slack out of the cable, and then I have it tied up in that same dimension. Okay, so we're under 1 inch. So I'm definitely outperforming the stock clutch setup with those few adjustments. So the longer lever arm was a big help, and then I'll need to make either an extension for this, or I'll probably just make another one of these that's longer. Otherwise, I wasn't able to turn this out enough to fully pre-tension the cable to really get a good idea of what it's doing. So there was just a gap in here, and that's not good when you're trying to figure out your clutch throw. And it's still pretty hard to turn the wheel with the clutch in. You kind of have to break through that. But once you do, it frees up and it's not too bad. And it's actually easier to turn now than with the stock setup. So the stock setup won't freewheel even a little bit, and this will. The stock setup just immediately stops. Well, they match, look at that. That's the same thing. Oh, that fits, that's better than factory. Oh yeah, look at that fit. In and out. She's too long though. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's a lot. 2. Wrong way. 1, 2. 3. Chamfer. Oh yeah. Oh, she fits. I'm gonna undercut that thread a little bit so this guy will creep up a little more. Just like a half a thread. I don't know what this tool's from, but it's gonna work. Now that can go all the way up. That fits snug. Much better. There's too much material here. Who needs clearance? Never heard of it. The depth of the drill in this one is about 300 thou. I'm going to shoot for 230 to 250. That will be the clutch done. So with hand control settled, we've got throttle and functioning clutch. Those are settled. Front brakes are literally just going to be hooking up stock stuff, so I'm not worried about that. So next I need foot controls. I bought a set of the world's cheapest rear sets. There's a left and a right, they're mirrored. And I guess if you want the lever on the bottom, you get it on the bottom on both sides. Or if you flip it, this one then becomes the right or the left side. Kind of preference. I'm going to do the lever on the bottom on both sides. And I need to figure out how I want to mount them. So they have a single screw in the middle that they mount with. This screw here. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think to add a little bit of strength, where I mount this, I'm gonna turn a piece on the lathe that supports on the outside and not on this little middle piece. So at least I'll get a larger area of support along this outside ring. So you can see the middle part sticks up a little, so I'll just make a little bit of clearance in the middle so I'm not gripping on that, I'm gripping on a much larger surface. So I need to turn something like that, and then I'm gonna bend up some more tube like this. This is a leftover from the subframe, I think, but I have another stick of this, so I'm gonna bend a chunk of this and kind of figure out where to go from there. But first, my bender needs a little bit of modification. Cool, now this guy's at a little bit of an angle. That really helped. I don't know why the fluid didn't seem to want to pump quite as well. It would only go about halfway before it would slow down on pressure. And I think it was because there's a bleeder hole up here that the fluid was leaking out of a little, so I gave it a little bit of angle and that seems to have helped it. I might have to make something where I can tilt it down just a hair. We'll see, but for now, it bends again. As far as the rear set location, this is the factory mount. Usually there's a foot pedal up here on the bike, and that's your brake pedal. Well, almost all of the Cafe Racer builds that I've seen mount the new rear set, what would be the passenger peg location, which would be somewhere back here. So I'm going to target this. I set it up. I didn't bolt everything together, but I set it up, and about where this location is really does seem the most comfortable with the setup I've got. So that's why I did hand controls first. I wanted to get hand controls, the subframe all situated, and that would let me get the optimal position. So I'm going to put it just a hair higher than this. It really isn't a super precision deal, but I'm going to target just a hair higher than where this would be on the bike. And I'm going to start bending up some material and see where we end up. So the first one is done. I'm pretty happy with it. I think I'm going to add a plate in here, maybe with a speed hole, a dimple die speed hole or something in it, to add a little bit of support. And I also might make, so this bolt has to go in. This bolt attaches the engine to the frame back here. It's pretty important. So I think I'm going to maybe turn another piece and then attach it to this, give it a little more rigidity and kind of complete the whole look of the deal. So this is one side done. I just need to make a brake lever that goes from here to the drum brake in the back. That won't be a big deal. I already have material. But I think I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. The other side is not going to be mirrored. The other side is totally different. But I'll pick up on a similar spot on the top and bottom and try and make the closest thing to a mirrored version that I can. So I'm going to get started on the second side. This left one came together super quick since it's basically the same as the right one, but bend the tube, bend the other tube the same way. When I turned up this guy, I made two. So it's pretty much already done. It's only been a couple hours and it's almost done. So it's kind of hard to show on camera, but they appear to be about the same spot back and up and down. They feel great. Somehow this guy got a little crooked. It's tilted down a hair, so I need to fix that when I weld it. But besides that, I'm going to get this guy welded up, and then rear set mounts are the hard part done. This one I'm probably going to do something similar with a plate in the middle, and then figure out how I might attach it to this stud, but we'll see. That'll be a problem for later. At least this primary mount is good, and then I can get a feel for it, get the controls hooked up. I'll have to make a way to connect this lever across to the shifter, and then if I connect it, make the shifter go up and do it, it'll be a down pattern. If I do it down, it'll be an upshift pattern. So I have a little bit of flexibility there, but pretty happy with how this is turning out. Let's get this welded up and finished.